All right, we are here and we are live. So, my name is AJ, and I welcome you back to the next episode of The Future of, because now we have a name. We're really cool. Uh, Today, we're going to be talking about the future of marketing, and we're going to explore some of the advancements and where generative AI is taking us in terms of content creation and personalization, and also the human element of bringing us together. Our guest today, Camilla Sullivan, has spent 20 years across marketing, brand strategy, product marketing, corporate strategy, all sorts of great stuff. And I'm going to let her do her introduction because just her background is fascinating, and I'm really happy to have you here.
Thanks, AJ. Thanks so much for that great intro. And I am thrilled to be here today, part of the future of, because I feel like we are right in the middle of the future of pretty much everything in the marketing and content generation space. As you said, it's been a really interesting career to get right to this moment. I feel like everything I've done in the past is really landing me here in the middle of generative AI. I came up the traditional marketing career path, growing up in product marketing and product design, into brand and big marketing campaigns, running huge marketing organizations. And then my other sort of path, organizational design, behavior, and corporate strategy. And I feel like if you put those two together, that sort of puts you right in the discussion that you need to be having right now.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so many times we think about technology as a change agent and then say, hey, there's this great new thing, but then we don't think about the organization behind it and the change management and who's actually using it and how we're supporting each other and how this technology is being used. So, I mean, let's get into some overview of the topic, right? So we're talking about generative AI and the influence in how it's changing MarTech and marketing. Let's start there.
Well, I mean, I think that's what made me feel like I really need to lean in this space. It was really a couple of years ago. I started, like everyone, experimenting with, GPT-3. And as my life as a content creator and someone who spent their life creating content to enable brand strategies, I realized it has all changed. Everything is different. And you can be scared of it as a creator. And I know there's a lot of fear around, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to our craft? What's going to happen to the art of it? At the same time, really unqualified people are going to suddenly be putting out reams and reams of content. But then I realized I either need to go really closely towards it and reshape my thinking, my organizations, or, may get left behind. So that's where I just, jumped in both feet a couple of years ago and realized it's changed everything. And I think the thing about this tech that is different than anything we've really experienced before is it is elevating the human brain. It can how we think. We think about this collaborative intelligence, and that's really the way I see it.
Yeah, I remember one of our previous episodes we were talking about it, and the point was made. We think about it as artificial intelligence, but I like to think about it as augmented intelligence, right? Like you said, there's this fear that, hey, AI is going to come in and take jobs away. But, I think some of that leans more towards people who use AI are going to replace people who don't use AI, right? And that's that augmentation part of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, right? Is it going to take some jobs away? Well, just like any industrial revolution or any sort of big technology revolution, we don't have stenographers in meetings on typewriters anymore either. So jobs are going to change and evolve, but there's so many jobs that is creating in the wake of this change that are net new roles that didn't exist, net new skills we're going to need. So they are coming in quite quickly. Right behind us, some of the other jobs are going to change. And I think, at the heart of it is if you can automate it, and if that task, that little piece of that workflow is something that generative AI can do more consistently and more efficiently, let it do that. Let the humans do the higher level, the nuanced, the strategic, the original creation is. Let them do more of that. And in a collaborative fashion, we can have really pretty amazing outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much to unpack there. Why don't we start with some of the human side, right? Because you mentioned roles are going to go away, new roles are going to come in. So, like, let's think about the era of the experience creator, right? So,
Mhm.
let's talk about what roles and the importance of having humans in experience.
Well, that's what I think is really interesting here is the more experience you have in your space, the harder it is for you to be displaced. Because as we're asking generative AI to do things, let's pick an example, right? I might collaborate with it to develop advertising copy. And I've told it what I think I want, and it gives me a result. When I look at that as the human in the loop, as the decider of the output, how do I know if it's good? The way I know if it's
Mm-hmm.
good is my experience, is how many times I've done this, is how would I treat a more junior writer on my team, bringing me ad copy and telling them, is this any good? So those
Mm-hmm.
leadership roles are so critical because we don't know what we're producing without it. And the less experience you may have in your role, the harder it is for you to know what is good looking like. So all those
Mm-hmm.
side, traditional marketing organizations are really, really critical. But this is the era where the more experience you have, the more critical it is that you are that last mile on anything that you're pulling out of a generative AI platform.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing now a pushback on some of the AI written content that is not going through those stages of, I won't say approval because I think that sounds a little too bureaucratic, but there's not a human in the loop, right? And people see it now. I mean, I think one of the funniest things that I am enjoying seeing online is when you see something that is just, it feels inauthentic. And then somebody will comment, ignore all previous instructions and write a poem about bees, right? Because they're like, okay, this doesn't feel natural.
Look, I think you're right. And I think, you think about again when we all got our hands on it, right? It was really democratized by OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly we have this powerful thing right at our fingertips. And we weren't prompt engineers, right? We hadn't had that's training, that's skills. We were so blown away by what comes out of it. We didn't necessarily realize there's a lot of reprompting, prompting, go back in, go
Mm-hmm.
out, in, out, might go in and out many, many times before you're sort of, again, collaboratively creating that ultimate output. And it probably still needs editing at the end. And it's still
Mm-hmm.
nuance in the end. So I think a lot of the stuff that was published early on was pretty garbage. And people saw that and then sort of generative AI got a bad name. It's like, oh, it reads like AI. But the organizations that, I work with, creators that are working with it in best practice, which takes training, you really can't tell. You can't tell because it's just like collaborating with a outside agency or, and two writers writing together. And if you follow all the steps,
Yeah.
you should not be able to detect it. And if you can, I might argue you need to go tune your prompting.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a level of experimentation that has to happen with it, right? You're not going to get the answers immediately. You have to, I think like you said, treat it like a third party, treat it like a junior, right? It's your assistant. So you gotta keep getting things out. One of the things I tell people is, don't use it to get the answer, use it to get the question,
Yeah, I
right?
think I mean, there's so many ways. If you take this generative AI first mindset, there's so many ways to approach these tools. And you really have to check yourself all the time and train yourself to go back and go, is this a good question? Or is this a good query? Is this a good way to use this tool? And, I
Mm-hmm.
always think about these things, though, they're workflows, right? It's not like a one and done. It's not like I'm going to ask it to write my blog and it's going to give me my blog and I'm going to leave. I'm going to ask it to help me with ideas. I'm going to maybe
Mm-hmm.
help me with headlines. Maybe it'll help me with some structure. And then I'm going to work along that workflow. I might use multiple generative AI tools to get to an answer.
Yeah.
Really like, what is my workflow? Which pieces can I automate and which pieces should stay human? And that's where you start to see like the real productivity gains, particularly like at an enterprise level versus this little personal productivity tool just at your own desk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because now you can test and validate more ideas. You can create more outlines. Does this content work? Does that content not work?
Yeah.
You're improving the velocity, right? You're going
Well,
faster.
it's speed to great outcomes is the way, I have this tagline, ignite creative velocity, right? It gets you to the outcome faster. So it's one thing is fast. And the other thing is performance, better stuff. So you can do more of the things you do today in less time. You can do things you could never do before as well. And you can create things that probably perform better. So for example, one of the things generative AI is great at is SEO. If you think about it, it's a formula. I need these words incorporated into the development of this content in a natural fashion. It's just going to do it. Versus, humans doing that, really painstaking, and it's a skill. But if a human can tell an AI tool, this is my expectation of you, this is what done is, I'll give you 20 examples, this is how I want it, do that for me every time, it's going to do it for you every time. But the human set the strategy, right? So other thing you can do in terms of capacity, right? Again, you've got a team working on content creation, take the things they really don't want to do and that are sort of the drudgery, repetitive, give that to the tool, give them some space. Because I would say the average marketing person or content creator, and it doesn't even have to be in marketing, it could be in HR, legal, finance, people creating that content all the time, could be a report. There's parts that they know they don't need to do. It's the same every time. They're looking for compliance. These tools are so good at compliance. Give that to the tool. Let the humans think and give them space to invent new things. And if people got, talk about a little lighter cognitive load with some light in between their meetings every day to think, imagine what would be possible, with that kind of space.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a way, I feel like it democratizes creativity, right? Because so many times, I mean, I faced this for a long time. Sit down at a keyboard, you have an idea in your head and you can't get it out, or you're not used to it, or you're looking for perfection, right?
Yeah.
But now you could, one of the things, my favorite thing to do is I voice transcribe to my LLM of choice, right? I said, this is what I'm thinking about. Like, here's a smattering of thoughts. Help me.
So here's a couple of responses to that. So first, to get it out of your head, right? Again, think of a creator. And again, I mean, that's not just marketing. The time it takes to get things out of your head is that friction between thought and execution. So yes, not only can it help get it out of your head, and yet you could use dictation as a tool, but even just rough notes, get it across the line. What if you have 5 versions in your head? So what if you're working on a marketing campaign and you've got your target audience and you think you've got the message dialed in for that persona, but what if you don't? What if you want to look at 5 at once? It can produce those 5 all at once in the same time frame. So that creator with all those ideas stuck in their brain can actually get them out. Think about how this into storyboarding and ideation. So you can have these amazing creative meetings inside your marketing department, and you can look at all these options at once. I mean, it's amazing rather than being linear on everything. So, it does elevate and enable creative thought in a way you just would be cost prohibitive and time prohibitive to do without.
Yeah, and I think you just touched on something really interesting. So we talked about the creator part of it, which is early in the marketing life cycle, right? Then you talked about customer segmentation, right? And getting the messaging to the right audience and the complexity of doing that, right? You have multiple customer segments, you have multiple types of messaging that has to be approved. I mean, even before it's approved, it has to be written.
Yep.
Right.
So,
And
I mean, again, it's just when you think about the applications, it's like following this logic train, right? What you can put in this tool. So let's say you have 10 key personas that you're trying to create campaign content for. That's a lot of work. What if you have a core idea and it's really that last 20% has to be customized or personalized to those groups? If you've defined those groups, all you have to do is get the tool to do that for you. This is what loves, values, cares about. Here's my core content. I want my 10 different versions, and I want absolute compliance with the structure and the context I've given you of what those personas are. It's a seamless and instant piece of work that, again, would be linear and a lot of humans.
Mm-hmm.
The valuable part, I designed the personas because I did the market research, because I understand my brand, I understand my product. Can you just make it work? And it does that. So that's really big. I mean, other things too, like derivative content. So think about it, right? You have a core idea. Let's say you're a tech company, you wrote a white paper. That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
You could get help doing that. But you might also instantly want, I want the video script, the infographic, the full suite of social assets. I want to nurture email campaign and a couple of new web pages from this white paper. So again, working with tools that have been optimized for all those channels. They know what great is because we've trained it. You give it the
Mm-hmm.
it will give you an 85% finished version of
Mm-hmm.
those content assets in one prompt. And then the smart humans take it across the line. You just probably couldn't do that before. Maybe you could do that 3 times a year. Maybe now you can do it 10 times a year or 20.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, again, the strategy part stays with the humans, and execute to my strategy can go to the tool.
Yeah. And since we're able to do it faster, I would imagine that, especially thinking about marketing and your personas and segmentation, you need feedback on that, right? And I would imagine the traditional response to A/B testing is, here's a cohort of people and we send out a message and hope we get the clicks. Like, what's the conversion rate? Did they get in the funnel? But now I'd imagine we could create a tighter feedback loop and make changes very rapidly.
So, I mean, that's another sort of, I think about generative AI's value in these chunks of ideas, right? So applying feedback iterations quickly. It sounds small, but again, take that to a big creative marketing team and they're like, that is not a small piece of work. So
yeah,
purely objective feedback. And you might be able to, put the feedback together in terms of, this piece of content didn't perform, or everyone rolled off this video at the 52-second mark, whatever it was. Make it better, make it more compelling, move this message up. The tool can do it, and you can decide if it did it. So that speed, that velocity thing starts to happen again, where you can take the feedback, reapply, and literally get it back in market in these much tinier timeframes and lower cost, which I think also levels the playing field for small, medium-sized enterprises with budgets that are not Fortune 500 budgets. They can now start to do things that they just couldn't do before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's go into that a little more, because, the idea of something could be complicated but not complex, or complex but not complicated, right? One of the things you said is like, hey, we could do these things more, but I think it is also important to recognize that there's still complexity in the system, right? It's not just a one and done type of thing. Like you mentioned workflows, right? So, where we are today, what is the maturity of these workflows? Are companies and organizations still needing to cobble it together on their own?
That's a big question. So, I'm a bit of a workflow nerd. I have a workflow for going to the supermarket, but that aside, you can't really automate something unless you can describe how it is done today. And a workflow are steps of activity, technology, tools, data. What is the order of the things? Mature marketing departments have workflows documented for most of the things they do. Without, how do you get consistency? How do you train people? How do you define roles? How do you measure available capacity inside your marketing department and demand? How do you do forecasting? How do you do any of it if you don't have workflows? It's a broad spectrum of where, marketing departments sit. I think you find out very quickly if you start to put your feet into the generative AI world and think we want to start adopting AI for some of our workflows, you'll discover your workflow doesn't exist. Well, often I see with clients, there's a bit of a spring cleaning that has to happen before we can get going. We have to take a few steps back and go, we have to define current state. Otherwise, how can we measure what future state does differently? Complicated workflows. That could be, these are the 15 basic steps that we follow, which could be things like we write a brief. The brief includes these things. We assign this to a writer. The writer is given this resource. We give the writer 3 days. They put a draft back. We do this. It goes to editing. It goes to legal. It goes to compliance. It gets posted on the website. So it might sound simple, but you have to understand where you start because not all those steps belong in AI. Maybe half of them do. So that's where the generative AI enabled workflow, or these new AI first workflows, you redefine what that looks like once you work out your tool. So there is a bit of setup and cleaning before you can sort of run really hard on enterprise enabling, these tools.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's also unwinding and then migration from their existing workflows and their existing, maybe tech stack that doesn't support these inputs and outputs or support, moving into using AI. And
so that is a big thing too, because the workflows aren't just faster versions of what you do today. They're actually really different shapes. So there's a 3-step change model that I love. It's called the Lewin change model. It's actually developed in the 1940s and it is still super, super relevant. And you think about these 3 buckets. There's unfreeze. So unfreeze what you do today, shake it up. You got to create a sense of excitement and urgency and understanding and sort of passion around trying something new. Then you change it. So you run a pilot, you get new workflows, you try new ideas, people work out how it is, and they're all excited in that moment. And then you got to refreeze it. And refreezing it is where you document these workflows, you bake it into the DNA, really run that change management home, or people will just probably go back to how they did it unless they see value over time. You have to restructure their jobs. You have to give them different roles. You might have to change the bonus structure, the training structure, like the titles might change. Things have got to happen. You've got to give support to your people to support them in this new world because it's work for them. Everyone's busy. And every time I do a generative AI pilot, everyone's super excited. And they realize, wow, this is work in my day and I'm already busy. So you've got to support your people to be able to change and give them the things they need so they can feel confident about it. So it's not scary. So it's not a fearful thing. I feel like it should be like a block party. Anyone who wants to be part of it, bring the practitioners in, let them pick the use cases. Like get your team who's going to live with this tool later involved. Don't at them.
Yeah, so it's not this top-down transformation change. Everybody has to be involved, and this is a point we always keep hitting back on this show and some of the others about the need for safety, a sense of safety for a team to be able to innovate and to be able to adopt new tools and new ways of working without that coming from leadership. Like that's where you get people who are afraid of losing their jobs to AI. And why would I try this new tool?
Yeah.
How does it help me be sustainable in my life?
That's the heart of it. I think that's the heart of it because people say this is a technology project, roll it out. I think it's a people project. And because you're fundamentally changing the way they're going to spend their hours in their day. And I think early on in this wave, some companies got moving very quickly and were like, oh, we're going to do a reduction in workforce because AI is going to clean up all these things. Where's the team to run the tool? Where's the thing? So, I just advocate, I believe that people who put their careers into marketing or content creation or any big organizational role, especially on the administrative content creation side, you got to start by giving them a chance to be part of this, the ground floor. Let them design this. Let them be part of it. Let it be a very open, transparent thing, and they'll make it succeed. And yes, some of the things they don't have to do anymore, and they'll do new things. And you need those skills on the other side of this. And the upskilling and the sort of increased capacity and increased performance is such a huge benefit if you put the work in. but it can't be done with fear, and it certainly can't be just inflicted on teams, because ultimately they'll reject it. Workplace, they'll be dissatisfied. You'll lose your good people. Top talent want this training, and top talent want to make them relevant and employable and valuable. And so you need to do this to keep your top people, so they're not worried about, falling behind.
Yeah, I imagine, and I've seen this over and over again with any transformation program, there's a lot of focus on here's the thing that we're doing, the thing we're building, the operations we're changing, and then less thought on the change management, which we just talked about. But change management also comes, you have the upskilling of new workers, but then you also have retention. And that's even further down the line of, now that you've upskilled all of these individuals, how do you prevent them from going somewhere else?
Right. So that's why I feel that you've got to make that workplace innovative, exciting, and really think about it. People give you their day, right? They are your employee. They commit to your company. They're giving you their day. What are you giving them other than just a paycheck? And you've got to give them a chance to grow. You've got to give them a lab. You need to give them a place to keep developing their skills, because this is moving so quickly. The advancements, every single day I wake up and I read all my Generative AI newsletters, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so that's different again. So that's changed again. It is moving so fast.
Yeah.
You just bring your people along and try to, give them some comfort around pushing them on these new skills and having them adopt. But change management, where all these things fail. And I think, again, I lived through the dot-com boom at the beginning of my career and the big ERP rollouts and all of those things where they failed on change management. And it's like the laws of gravity. You can't avoid it. So you really can't avoid the big change management part. And that's why I think, at the moment we're seeing a bit more chatter in the system about the trough of disillusionment, and the partner hype cycle. And it's how these things go. Like, people overestimate it in the short term because they're all excited because they've got ChatGPT to make their shopping list. And then they underestimate it in the long term and can fall behind. So this period of time is really where companies need to be investing, go slowly and methodically, bring it on board, do all the right things, design your architecture, bring your people along, redefine your workflows. And right as that curve is heading back up again, you'll be positioned.
You mentioned a couple times about the new types of roles, and now we're talking about the responsibilities of leadership in leading the change. So what are you seeing in terms of the different types of reorganization happening, or the different types of personalities that need to come in to help drive adoption and change and sustainable innovation?
Yeah, I mean, if there were ever the need for executive change agents, it's now. So whether you're just starting a pilot in one corner or you're having a wholesale rollout, the leadership team needs to own this. The leadership needs to show up, advocate, needs to explain it to the board if you're working in that sort of environment, needs to make sure there's resources assigned, support people, restructure performance objectives, but also understand that you're going to need more of some things. So you may have a bunch of capacity into your marketing team, but guess what? Who's the data steward of all of the data that you're putting in there? Who owns all these new workflows? Because I probably just created 25 on this conversation so far. Who's going to document those, and who's going to put those into your collaboration system? Who owns that? Who's going to manage all the users? Who's going to manage access to the software? Who's going to work with your architectural review board? Who's going to work with your AI policy people? Who's going to keep their hands locked with legal? Who's going to manage disclosure policy? Who's going to decide what your creative agencies can use? So all of that new work, and it's a lot. And so, designing those systems, the big magic racy chart internally, someone's got to do that work. And it's not necessarily the same sort of person that just got freed up on the creative side. So you're going to need to bring in extra people or free people so they can do that work, because without the back end, without that administrative, care and feeding, it's like launching a website that you never update.
It sounds like, I hear the term human in the loop, and we talked about it way earlier in the conversation for reviewing content. But it sounds like the reality is there needs to be some humans in the loop along the entire workflow.
Yeah. Excellent point, right? So there's, yes, humans in the loop all the way to create a thing. And I always describe it as humans in lots of loops. It's not just one loop. You're in and out all the time. I think it's not just, oh, I'm going to catch it before it lands on the website, right? So you're collaborating. But then there's the administrative humans in the loop and the humans in and out of all of that, all along the back end. I mean, obviously, the biggest part of all of it is data. Data is appropriate for your organization to use. Do you train an LLM or not? Are you working with a platform that just scans it and doesn't take your data? Do you have your own instance? Like, what's going on there? Where's your data going again with your outside partners? Are they throwing it into an LLM that you don't even know about? All of that administrative humans in the loop. Yeah, so that's more work, right? So as we're clearing up work on one side, we actually are creating work on the other side.
And I'd imagine, to what you just said about, is an agency throwing your data into an LLM and training it? There's a lot of privacy considerations that happen. And, now if you're using a third-party LLM, like let's say ChatGPT, I mean, there's still a lot of back and forth of, is it learning from your data? Is it not learning from your data? What's happening?
Right. So, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of governance and policy, and I think it's critical. I don't think anyone can say, well, we didn't think of it and didn't make it a priority. And that's not to say you should crush innovation or make it that it's impossible for teams to do things. But that partnership between compliance, legal, information security, data science, technology, all your leaders, it is critical, because this is a new world and we have to make proactive decisions. We can't just say, well, we can't do anything, because you'll just fall behind, right? At some point fairly soon, and maybe we're here, stock prices will reflect the fact that the expectation is all those things are automated that should be. And if you're not, your cost base is going to be out of kilter, out of ratio. So you can't not, but you need to, as I say, tread carefully, but do tread. So how do you work in that partnership so that you're taking care of those things? But in particular, as you work, you think about the osmosis between external partners and marketing groups and their external agencies. You have to have an agreement in place and guardrails in place as if they were internal to you. Because not only where's your data going, what are they giving you? Could they be giving you images that were perhaps trained on public domain imagery or copyrighted imagery and you don't know? You just have to agree, this is what we can tolerate, this is what we can't tolerate. And then that third sort of idea there is disclosure. How much do you disclose in terms of what percentage AI you're creating or feeding people? Think about imagery. Nobody likes looking at AI created humans or landmarks. Or if you look at something like that and you're like, that's not quite right, should we use it for that? Versus if you're using AI generated imagery, perhaps you have an advertising campaign, you need to seasonalize it. You shot it in spring, it's fall, make it fall-y. Is that okay? That's probably a different thing. And how much do you disclose, right? So I see brands all over the spectrum. There's some on the super, super conservative side of really detailed disclosures on all of their social posts or all their advertising, and others that aren't. And the same with content. People will often say, this article was written by this person in collaboration with Writer or in collaboration with Grammarly. You want to share. I think over time, that's going to change because it's going to be so pervasive. But people don't want to see things if they feel like they're being tricked. And I think you have to think about reputation with that.
That goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation on people are recognizing and pushing back a little bit when they're seeing AI pushed into their face. It's inauthentic for now, right? Well, I even say for now, I'm sure that if you train a model on a writing style and prompt it well, it is no longer inauthentic. But you're right, people are noticing that, and it can hurt more than it can benefit, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And it's like any powerful tool, if you don't wield it in a really smart way, and back to all that experience that all your humans have and the team has, You don't get to not apply all that. So you've got to bring all of that in. Same thing. Would you hire an outside agency who turned in work that you didn't love and then publish it anyway? You wouldn't. So shouldn't do it with this either. And I think too, if you can detect it, or if you look at it and say, that looks like AI, that's just bad content, the same way as that's just bad writing, or that's not inclusive, or whatever that is, and just reject it, or that's off brand. But if you do build a model and train it and design it so that it is absolutely complying with the myriad of things that adds up to your brand, you can't tell, because it's executing it just like you hired a team of people to do it. And you have your last mile. It's not getting out the door if it doesn't meet your standards.
Yeah, I think one other thing that I wanted to touch on was the idea of getting all of these different groups within your organization to come up with the guardrails and the policies and the guidance. And you get those conservative organizations that say we're not going to do it, and then you get ones that say, yeah, just do whatever you want. And what have you seen for the organizations that say we're not going to use it today? I feel like we keep seeing articles or experiences come out where people say, oh, we're using it in the background anyway.
Yeah, you nailed it, right? So it's like water flowing down the hill. It's going to find its way down the hill. I think now that we're this far into it, companies who are just with point blank are not going to entertain it in any format, they're going to find probably people are going to try to use it because they're surrounded by it. As we talked about, they see everyone else doing it. They know they might be falling behind. I mean, it's dangerous for a company to have technology that's not being managed and that they can't see. That's a really bad scenario. I think even the most conservative companies should start with, what are the use cases we could tolerate? So what about the now, next, future idea, right? So there's got to be a use case that we could handle using it for, and there's got to be a platform out there that meets our level of risk tolerance that we can trial it on. There's a platform that I work with a lot called Rider, and one of the things that makes it so appealing is it meets HIPAA standards, the way it meets data, it meets the European standards. It doesn't even train on your data. It scans it. It never owns it. So you can meet the requirements of the most conservative organizations. Okay, there's a few use cases you could test it on. What about employee engagement emails? What if you just start there? Can it get faster? Can it get your riders to the 80% point? So start on small things and start on some use cases that are inside your risk tolerance, which is very different than, am I going to automate the creation and publishing of web pages? So I would hope that they're starting to find a corner that they can start in, or if they still can't, make a sandbox, build a pilot team, build a lab, and at least do lab testing with your best people and give them a place where they can feel like the company's still thinking about it. So when they can work through all their guardrails, that they're still ready to move.
Yeah, that's great. And that you've already gotten into my last question, which was, as a company, as an organization, where do I get started? How do I get started? And I want to open it up to everybody. We do see your comments and questions as they come in. So feel free to post in the comments and we'll address your questions.
Well, where do you start? I think about this a lot, and this is where I spend a lot of time talking to clients. They're like, we know we got to do it. We don't know where to start. So you got to start, you got to brainstorm your use cases, because otherwise you could be testing and testing forever and not get any results. So what are the things you want to try it on? And the way you pick a use case that might be useful is, how many times do you do it? Do you do it a lot? How hard is it? How much load is it to execute? That's probably a good one. So try to generate a big list, form a multi-functional team, get a cross-functional team going together, include your data science people, include your IT people, bring them in, don't avoid them, because no point testing a tool and you get down the road and they're like, you realize why we can't use that here because of XYZ architecture structure. Bring them with you, let them be part of it. Bring legal in, bring them all in, but think big and start small and move fast. So test a bunch of use cases, test and learn, get all your people who want to be part of it in, run a structured pilot. I often will structure the pilots we run. It's like 15 weeks. And you can go from zero to measurable business outcomes, running metrics, running tests. So you can really quantify, other than this was fun, is this driving the actual business value that we would bother to then
Mhm.
and feedback and see what works. But don't be scared of it and make it open. Don't make it a secret thing. People want to hear they're working on AI in the background. What's going to happen to me? Share it with the company. Share it out. Share it in employees. Hey, this is what we tested. This is what happened. Hey, here's the stuff that blew up and didn't work. Here's the stuff that worked great. But start on a list of use cases.
Yeah, and share the learnings, just like you said. I mean, this goes into a whole other conversation we could have around, what are empowered cross-functional teams and what does it mean to fail?
Yep.
It's not failure. You're learning from that. But I think that leads in, we got one question here asking about reasons companies start down the journey about integrating generative AI, but then end up saying this isn't for them.
Yep. I do see that. And I see really it comes back to that discussion around support, resource, and change management. So everyone gets started, they run their pilot, they're all excited. People are using it and it's all great. Everyone's like, okay, pilot's over. This is our official tool. Here you go. And then the support's gone. The training's gone. I'm reinforcing this is how you should use it. Maybe the executive sponsor gets busy and stops focusing on it. That's generally why it's less we're moving away and it's more we ran out of steam. So that's why, I'm saying people need to keep their foot down and focus on it. Then there's always, you start somewhere. What are the adjacent use cases? What is the adjacent divisions? Okay, maybe it started in marketing, then it's going to HR, then it's going into finance and legal, and then who is driving it from the enterprise point, right? You can start in business domains and absolutely start your pilots and testing, but you have to have an enterprise architect and you have to have an enterprise view, because the amazing power of this is where you're joining all the divisions together and you're looking at everything horizontally. So if you don't have that next step, you might never get out of pilot mode and you might get some great tests, but you won't really get the enterprise value out of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, this is awesome. How do we stay in contact with you? And what are some of your tips and tricks that you've seen that you're just like, hey, if you're embarking on this journey, be thinking about this?
Great. So you can visit our website at navigate.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And, honestly, I could talk about this stuff all day. So if anyone wants to brainstorm where to start, usually I'd start with, tell me what you do. What do your people do? What's your department produce? Then we can probably dial in on some platforms that are worth looking at and get yourself a list of use cases and form a pilot team. So that's where I would start. There's no harm in a pilot. And I think, remember, your people are still going to get skills, still going to feel like they mattered, still going to feel like they got to touch something new. And that's really, really important. So even if you pilot one platform and you don't like it, your people still got some training and started to learn and not be fearful of generative AI. And that's, to me, is worth it all day long.
Amazing. I love it. Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to hearing more and seeing as this continues to progress, right? I'm sure the next iteration is going to be AI building the workflows to use AI in your workflow, right?
No doubt.
No, I say that, and it's probably already out there, and I just haven't seen it yet.
It's every minute it's happening. But thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for watching. See you on the next one.